Have you ever considered how the dynamics of closeness change when confronted with a kidney cancer diagnosis? Or what showing vulnerability means when you're trying to process emotions you have yet to understand? Hi, and welcome to Kidney Cancer Unfiltered, the podcast by the Kidney Cancer Association, diving deep into the raw stories of kidney cancer patients and survivors. I'm Anna Maria Scaccia, your guide through the real, unfiltered experiences that often go untold. Today, we are joined by John Ferrell from the KCA's Patient and Caregiver Advisory Council, and Nichole Goble, Director of Community Initiatives at the Caregiver Action Network. Together, we'll dive deep into the complexities of intimacy and relationships when living with cancer or loving someone who has cancer. From the profound impact on self-perception to the art of communication and regular check-ins, we'll look at the unique challenges faced by both patients and caregivers. We'll also offer some strategies for managing the unpredictable dynamics that come with a cancer diagnosis, ones built on empathy and mutual support. So get ready for an honest conversation on intimacy and relationships that goes beyond the surface of our connections. John, Nichole, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. If you could, I would love for you to both introduce yourselves, kind of give a background of your story, and then we could go from there.
Sure. I guess I'll go first. So my name is John Ferrell. I'm based here in Austin, Texas. I am a kidney cancer survivor / warrior. I was originally diagnosed in 2010 with stage 3 clear cell renal cell carcinoma, had my right kidney removed, and went back under surveillance. So remained cancer-free for 7 years, and became stage 4 in 2017, and have been kind of in and out of remission or no evidence of disease for for the past 6 years or so. So I've gone through several clinical trials, and currently in a trial right now where we're treating any kind of new lesions that pop up with technology instead of drugs, so SBRT, ablations, and so forth. So so far so good, and happy to be here today.
Hi, my name is Nichole Goble, and I am the current Director of Community Initiatives at Caregiver Action Network. I've been with the program, organization for, I guess, 6 years now. What does time mean anymore? And do a lot of work with family caregivers. So really lead a lot of our engagement in roundtables and just having ongoing communication and network building with family caregivers across the lifespan, because we are an organization that serves family caregivers, all 90 million plus family caregivers in the US. One thing that is unique about our organization, and I think this is probably a little bit part and parcel with a lot of organizations in this field and similar to ours, is that we all have personal connections to family caregivers, to family caregiving and family caregivers. We've been family caregivers, we currently are, or we have been in the past. And so I was a family caregiver for my grandfather, who was diagnosed with bone cancer, and am a current family caregiver for my mom with advanced COPD, and I'm also someone with a disability, Turner syndrome. So my mom and I are kind of each other's long distance family caregivers.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a good segue into the first question that I had, or at least the first topic that I wanted to touch on. So one thing I noticed, being a survivor myself and also having been a caregiver for someone else in the public, if you will, it's caregiving is often talked about in this way of like what one person is doing for another, right? Like the stress of what one person is doing for the other and the stress that the person who's being cared for feels. But we never really go deep into the dynamics of like intimacy and relationships. It's mostly around what one is doing for the other, around the physical, medical part of it. So, and either one can start, but I would love to get your thoughts on, how has, well, we could start first with relationships and then kind of go into intimacy. How has your relationship really been either challenged or strengthened by this experience with cancer, with disabilities?
Yeah, I can start, and I did mention that I am not only a patient, but I was also a caregiver. My wife is a breast cancer survivor, so she did the whole chemo, radiation, double mastectomy, reconstruction, the whole bit. So we've as a couple have had to deal with being not only the patient but the caregiver to each other. And from a relationship standpoint, there's obviously been struggles of just how do we care for another in this new normal, if you will. But as a whole, I would say that it has brought us closer. It has renewed our relationship with each other in different ways, right? We've got to know each other in ways that we haven't had to deal with in the past. I've been married almost 25 years now, and the past 10 years have been kind of a give and take with us as we've gone through these diagnoses. And thank God that we weren't going through it at the same time. In between my initial diagnosis and my reoccurrence is when she was diagnosed and with the breast cancer, and she also had a benign meningioma brain tumor as well. So we've been through some challenges, in a relationship standpoint, and it certainly brings out, the worst, but also the best. And we've powered through those challenges, and as a whole, it has made us stronger as a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when you are an individual that's going through an illness and you are getting care from a spouse or a partner, in particular, relationship dynamics are always going to be a little bit impacted because there's a whole new element now to that relationship of care. And that can be really difficult for folks in making that transition. And I love kind of the use of the phrase the new normal because we use that pretty frequently as well. But it's something that a lot of people just don't anticipate and don't expect, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in a different position in their relationship, and that's always really difficult. But it's normal, and there are certainly lots of ways that I think, depending on your caregiving situation and all of the factors, that you can at least help kind of keep that in check as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think you both answered in a way that actually relates to this question I'm about to ask. So for myself and my relationship, I think what we had difficulty going through my first cancer experience is I had a background in caregiving, not just for my former partner, but also my grandparents. And so for me, being a caregiver is something like I understood the dynamics of it, but my partner at that time didn't have to ever go through caregiving. And so he wasn't, familiar with what comes with that. And so I think during my first cancer experience, that's what made navigating those dynamics a lot more difficult. But what I wanted to ask was, did you find, both John and Cole, the fact that you had that experience with caregiving? I'm not necessarily sure, Don, for you, which came first, right, in terms of cancer experiences, but does having a caregiving background, if you will, help with navigating those dynamics, or is there still a bit of the same kind of tensions?
Yeah, and now kind of flip that. So having the patient experience and having caregiving been provided to me, I think it helped me when my wife was diagnosed with the breast cancer after me. I was kind of more the tough love caregiver. Like, come on, let's suck it up. We got to power through this. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Remain positive, because that's what helped me from a patient experience get through this. So, and I think at times she was a little bit kind of shocked, like, "Hey, I just want to be taken care of," and where I was kind of like, "Hey, let's go, let's get up, let's go exercise, let's do this, let's do that," as opposed to letting her, uh, feel bad and feel sick. Granted, our cancers were very different and our treatment options were very different. From a, she had chemo and radiation, which is a very, very high effect on my body, on her body, whereas my treatment was a little bit different. Yes, I had immunotherapy and I had side effects, but it wasn't as
Yeah.
physical as a breast cancer treatment. So yeah, it was I didn't have caregiving experience, but having been the patient, I think helped me provide kind of that care for her, or at least know what she may want or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think uh oftentimes whether you've gone through a situation where you've had the experience of being a caregiver and then you find yourself having a diagnosis and how being a care recipient, um or either kind of order that you go in, I think the experiences can really be beneficial. Just from a personal experience, um I had open heart surgery not too terribly long ago, and my partner at the time, um it was good that I had some caregiving experience, having cared for my grandfather, following a couple of his surgeries, and with my mom, because it helped. And obviously working at Caregiver Action Network was pretty beneficial too. But it was helpful to be able to say, okay, I had the practical experience of understanding how I can explain what I need. And I know ways that I can explain certain parts of the care so that it makes sense. And so that was really, I think, beneficial. And then, being someone that was born with a disability, and, my grandpa said, I trust you because you've been on this side of things. And you understand, when I say I'm in pain, you have a different understanding of that. So yeah, I think I think it is really beneficial. And it does help with communication. I think, for first and foremost, at least from my personal experience, it helps being able to put things in ways back and forth that make things understandable and much more smooth.
And I think that's a good segue into talking about intimacy. So not just physical, but emotional intimacy. How did you, John, this is for both of you, but John, I'd love for you to start. How did you find yourself, handling the issue of intimacy? Like, was intimacy impacted for both of you or for yourself?
Yeah, I definitely would say so. And kind of going back to the point I made about, our cancers being very different. As RCC, we don't look like a typical cancer patient.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of in the inside, and I've never really been symptomatic, and you don't lose your hair like a typical cancer patient does. Whereas for my wife, she went through a complete physical transformation. She lost her
Yeah.
hair, she had a double mastectomy, she, went through reconstruction, after some time. So, our physical, well-being was certainly affected, from what it was, prior to us being diagnosed. And I was diagnosed first, so a lot of my unwillingness to be intimate or feel intimate, whether that's emotionally or physically, was because I was, first went through a radical nephrectomy, and I had a big scar down the middle of my, below my stomach, and I didn't, physically did not feel, like I was before, so I didn't feel, I guess, normal, if you will. Felt that I was a little disfigured and so forth. So
Yep.
fast forward to to when I was re-diagnosed and I was going through a systemic therapy and I was going through immunotherapy. I was tired. I had no energy to do anything, much less be intimate with my partner. Emotionally or physically. I we didn't have conversations like we normally did. It changed. So going through that change was certainly different for us, and again, we found ways to power through it. And with her diagnosis, again, it was very physical. She for a long time she didn't have any hair. For a long time, she didn't have any breasts. So it was just again kind of a new normal, and working through some of those changes, and it found that it was deeper than a physical
Yeah.
appearance. That kind of brought us closer. So
Oh, I was just gonna say I I think that's often something that a lot of people don't realize is that there's the physical component, I think, of recovery, um, as well, especially like if you've undergone surgery, or are going through some treatment that's ongoing and has that physical impact. But it's also just, I think, for both the individual that's going through it and the caregiver, it's just a lot of adjustment to the newness of what that can do. That can be, I think, unexpected and one of those hurdles to get over.
John, you had made a point that just articulated a lot of what I think sometimes about my own body is like feeling disfigured from the scars. And, I think when it comes to RCC and maybe even other cancers that don't have that very physical representation of it, it could be kind of, hard to articulate, or maybe not part of the discussion of how just even having scars can impact how we feel about ourselves. I know I just went through thyroid cancer, and part of the treatment is, suppressing my TSH levels and like getting into a very hypothyroid state. And one of the symptoms of that is like losing your hair and like hair loss. And that's been getting worse. And just and when you were talking, I just thought about that. I'm like, wow, no, that actually is something that I think I'm worried about internally in terms of like, what does this mean for the way I look? Like, will I continue to be like, if I lose that hair, am I going to be attractive to my partner still? Like how, because for women particularly, like hair is a thing, right? Like hair is like, I mean, for anyone really, right? It's like, there's such an importance that we place to our hair that it just made me think about all the different ways that like, even if our treatment isn't chemo, long lasting into survivorship, that we can just not feel like ourselves enough to have that physical intimacy, which ends up impacting the emotional intimacy. Cause then you like, maybe for some people, I know for myself, you kind of shut down. And I know I just went on a rant, but it's just, it's quite interesting how much there's so like, it's so involved in this topic.
no, absolutely. Like I didn't want to take a TKI because I didn't want my hair to turn white, right? So I don't dye my hair, although it kind of looks like it is pretty dark, but for my age. But I got good genes. But I, that was one of my biggest fears. Is like, oh, I don't want to take Sutin or Votrian or one of those because I don't want my hair to turn white. That it's that physical thing. So yeah, I mean, it's true. And I didn't think that it would, I would, hey, be affected by a scar or whatever the case is. But in hindsight, it did kind of bother me. So
Yeah. And I mean, I completely understand. Like, again, I have a scar on my neck and I look at it sometimes and I'm like, again, you're just in your head, it's like, oh, I'm disfigured. Like these scars on my body, like, oh, I'm Frankenstein now, right? Or
yeah,
Frankenstein's monster. Let's be correct. I need to be correct. It's like I'm Frankenstein's monster now. And it just, I think, again, we don't necessarily put voice to it, right? Until like we're in those moments staring in the mirror at ourselves. And like, I
yeah.
don't know, for me, it's just realizing how much it kind of impacts a day to day sometimes, right? Nichole, what do you think about this? Like, what is your, as an expert here and in your own personal experience, how can we, I guess, get past that, like the way we look at ourselves after treatment, during treatment, and the impact on intimacy?
I think in having gone through not what you guys have spoken to so beautifully, but just in kind of personal experience, yes, like scars and things like that, it does impact our own relationship with our bodies. And that is that's something that we have to work with. And that's something that we have to continue that challenge each and every day. I think that just open communication, open and honest communication with our loved ones about how we're feeling and how we're processing things, what our reactions to this experience is vital, because they can't understand if we don't put it to words for them. And I know when I've had surgeries and I feel disfigured, I have a big scar down my chest, and it's hard. It took me a long time to feel a little bit more comfortable with it, but it was so important that I put voice to that to my partner, so that there wasn't a situation that would come up to where I would be upset because they didn't understand, with me not completely going through the process of, well, they don't understand because I haven't told them. I haven't sat down and said, look, this is how I feel about this. And yeah, maybe they think I'm going to be silly about it, or they can have their own feelings. But if I'm putting it out there, we can have those conversations. And it can help build to, I think, our own. I think it makes it easier for us to process on our own as well.
But I think the open communication part of it, that is so important. I definitely wasn't perfect about it. I don't know about you, John. I even this time around, I haven't been 100% perfect about it, even though I knew better and I learned better. But I would love to talk about open communication in terms of emotional intimacy, right? That's the interplay, right? You may feel this way physically, you may have a certain relationship with your body, but our partners aren't mind readers. We're not mind readers, even though we would love for that to be the case. So Nichole, I'd love you to talk more about open communication as a necessity in order to have that emotional intimacy, or at least to be able to navigate the challenges of it in a healthy
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. When I think you're going through an illness, there's so much that is going on in your head, that you're just kind of, in conversation with yourself. It feels constantly. And the ability to share some of that with the loved ones, with your partner, and with other folks that are very close to you. Because emotional intimacy, I think, is so valuable as just part of that caregiver and care recipient relationship. Again, it's about being able to communicate what I need, and also for the caregiver, for
Yep.
a partner to share how they feel, to say, I feel really uncomfortable, like having to give you these injections every day. This is something that I'm going to have to get used to. It's not that I have a certain reaction to it. It's just, it's different. And I've never had to do this before. So being able to, it doesn't seem like, oh, that's emotional intimacy, but it's such an important piece of it, because it's being able to say, okay, well, I need help with this. Is this something that you're going to be able to do? And again, going back to sharing, some of those really challenging emotions. It's easy to, I think, share when we have a good sense of what a reaction will be, when we can kind of play out a conversation in our head when we bring something up. It's always scary to go into uncharted territory. And so when you're bringing up a difficult topic, that can be really hard. And so that additional security is I think, assuring. But it's so important that when you are having these really challenging feelings, it's about yourself, your body, your illness, you're struggling with something, to be able to put that out there and use that to form that closer connection, is so helpful, because again, it's letting them know a little bit more about what you need, where you are. And it's also, I feel that every time that you are able to share in that way, it's an open invitation for them to do the same. It's saying, I'm doing this because I feel that it's important that you can do this to, for yourself as well, that you can come to me. So I think that it's, that open communication is important, because it's really about it going both ways, so that everyone feels heard, and supported by each other in that dynamic.
I think, though, that is part of the emotional intimacy, because there's that vulnerability in one saying what you need, and there's that vulnerability in being on the end of that and accepting what the person is saying. I think, just thinking about life experience, talking to other people, I think both caregivers and the recipient of care believe that they need to be strong, right? I feel like at the end of the day, there's this assumption that we need to be strong, either that we're not letting our illness hold us down and we're resilient, or that we're always going to be there for that person and we have to put down our own emotions in order to kind of put them first. And so it's like we're kind of going through the same thing, two sides of the same coin, to be cliche, but having that open communication really just exposes that vulnerability in a way that makes you understand each other more. How would you both react to that?
Yeah, I agree, and it's funny listening to kind of Nichole and the females' take of it, because guys in general are not very open,
Yep.
and females, I think, are have no problems, or is easier for them to express their emotions. At least that's how my wife and I are, right? So that was an adjustment for me to be able to open up more, and being able to tell her, yes, I would like you to do this, or help me with this, or no, I do not need your help, whatever the case is. And I think a lot of times, people just like to shut down and, hey, I got this. I don't want to bother anybody. I just want to deal with this on my own. But it's important to open up, and it's important to share those feelings because, the more you hold them in, and the more it just, compounds, and it'll eventually come to a head, and you may explode. So, but it is important to open up, and that was a big challenge for me, being a guy. Whereas, my wife, she, didn't have any problems letting me know what she needed help with, or hey, leave me alone. I don't need any help right now. I just kind of want to be left alone, whatever the case is. So that was a big dynamic for us.
Well, and I think from another perspective too, and I love how you framed the statement of, everybody has to be strong. Everyone is expected to be strong. I think for caregivers, there's that pressure, and I certainly cannot tell my loved one that I'm caring for I'm struggling, and I'm not going to be able to eat. Like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know, how I'm going to be able to juggle all of this, how next week we're going to make it to all of these doctor's appointments when, the kids have these appointments, and how are we going to do it all? And being able to, I think, again, show that vulnerability, express a need, and concern. I think that there's that real struggle for caregivers, because we have to do it all. We have to carry everything on our shoulders and be supportive and strong, which we can, but we can also be vulnerable and share, hey, I'm really struggling and I need some help. So, when we're having these big conversations, I would like to start having that included. Like, what are some things that we can be doing so that I can get a break, have time to go and run a few errands, or just have some time so I can, go back to book club on the weekend, or, go play a game of whatever. So yeah, I think it's, again, that vulnerability going both ways. And it's definitely, I think, one of those things that we don't think about, the real detrimental impacts that holding back can have, in wanting to be strong. For example, my grandfather, when he was diagnosed with cancer, he hid his diagnosis from the entire family because my grandmother had COPD and was in kind of the final handful of months of her life, and didn't want to say anything because wanted us all to focus on grandma, and didn't want to do anything that would take the focus away from her or get her, worried about him, concerned about him. And so by the time that he ended up telling us the cancer had progressed to a point that, treatments were, we had cut down a few of our options. And, you obviously understand that decision, but, as his grandkid, I was so mad. It's like, Grandpa, why didn't you say anything? We could have been helping you too. We could have, we could have been there for you. And so it's hard, and it's just something that you have to kind of sort through every day to figure out, okay, what's the next step here? What conversations do we need to have? What are the pain points, and how can we work together to get around them?
Yeah, it always feels like a very like either or, never a both and kind of thing. And something you had said made me think, both of you had said, maybe think about the ways that we can be vulnerable, right? For myself, I shut down, right? I wasn't one to express what I need. I just wanted him to know, I wanted my partner to know what I needed because it's just very hard for me to not be that strong warrior, right? Like it's hard for me to not break that archetype. But I think one thing I learned for myself going into the thyroid cancer experience is figure out the way that felt most comfortable for me to be vulnerable. So maybe it wasn't telling him I'm afraid of dying. Maybe it was just simply asking him, hey, can you go to the store for me? Hey, can you manage this? Hey, can you watch my son? Hey, can you take him there? Like asking him to do those physical things. I think once I did that, it allowed me to be more open, really with that deep kind of stuff you want to talk about. Is that an experience maybe for you, John, that you had, or how were you able to find ways to be vulnerable, whether,
Yeah,
however it may be?
yeah, no, that's you make a good point, because when I was re-diagnosed in 2017, entered into a clinical trial, and that clinical trial required me to live in Houston for the first 30 days and then go back every week, and I did that for 2 years. And at first, my wife wanted to be there and be there, but it was hard on her, and I could see that it was hard on her, knowing that, hey, I'm stage 4. We don't know if this is going to work. We all know what stage 4 means, and we all look at the statistics and so forth. And I think it would affect her more than it affected me. I felt like sometimes I was kind of comforting her as the caregiver, saying, hey, it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right, where there's a lot of options, a lot of treatment options. So as I progressed through that clinical trial, it was important for me for our family to be as normal as possible. And we have, at the time, my son, when I was re-diagnosed, was 10, 11 years old. So it was important for me, for her, to be with him and to take care of him. And that made me feel better. So I went through a lot of my treatments and trips back and forth to Houston alone. I had friends and family that would make the trips with me sometimes, but emotionally for me, and my well-being mentally, was knowing that she was at home with our son, making sure things were as normal as possible for him. So that kind of put me at ease also. And then as I progressed through the trial, and things were getting better, and my lesions were shrinking, and eventually I had a complete response, it kind of fell into this new normal again of, hey, things are going to be better. So it was tough, not kind of doing it on my own, but at the same time, it was better for my well-being, knowing that she was at home taking care of our son and trying to make things as normal as possible for him.
That makes sense. For me, when it comes to like appointments and like surveillance, it was funny. My partner and I were talking, and he wanted to come to like an appointment. I'm like, oh no, it's just a routine thing. And I'm like,
Yeah,
it's really weird that I just called like a cancer related doctor's appointment as just routine. And we laughed about
yeah,
it. But it's like we had an open conversation about like those points where I really do need him there versus like, hey, don't worry about taking the day off of work, because it might, as your wife, might worry him like, oh, I should have been there. Like
yeah,
but it's like, no, I just needed to text you to let you know I was upset. Like, it's just
yeah,
me expressing myself. You don't actually physically have to be here, but hey, this appointment coming up where I'm talking to the oncologist, yes, please be there. Cause even if
yeah.
it's good news, I still need like that support. So it's just thinking about the ways in which it's like, what do I really need versus, just really what, there is no verses there. It's just, what do I
Right.
really need and how we make that happen. Nichole, I feel like you had a response to that. I know I'm rambling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just again being able to communicate what you need, and that's going to change. And this is for everyone. When you are in that relationship, being able to communicate, hey, I really need you at this appointment because I'm really worried, and what we may find out could be pretty impactful. And I may need some of that additional support, or to be able to say like, hey, I've got this. This appointment is absolutely fine, because maybe your partner or your spouse, whomever, is saying, hey, I want to go with you to every appointment. You don't need to go with me to every appointment. That's okay. I love that you want to support me in that way, but if there are appointments where maybe something has come back, or there's something that could be a little bit more weighty, certainly I need you there. But I hope that if on the off chance something does happen, and I can either call you, or that night or whenever, can sit down and kind of share where I am, and make a plan. I think that it's just, again, really communicating that, because again, it's opening that door. It's saying, for your partner, hey, I want to go because I'm worried. Okay, well, let's figure this out together. How can we navigate this so that we're both feeling pretty comfortable, and kind of getting those needs met.
I also think a part of this too is having the conversation about how and when you need them, and when you need to rely on something else. I think sometimes that can be a hard thing to navigate when you don't need your partner or your caregiver to be there for you when they want to be there. So what are some ways to navigate that, or to talk about that, where you're like, I love you, you're great support system, but you're not the person I need to have this discussion about my issues or the experiences I'm having. What are some ways to kind of manage that conversation and that dynamic of the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen it done a lot of different ways, or I've heard people share lots of different ways that they've approached it. I think oftentimes it's just having regular check-ins, seeing, like, having these little regular mini State of the Unions. Where are we? What's going on? What do we have coming up? What kind of support do you need? How can I be there? Do you need me there? And it's giving an opportunity in kind of a non-pressured way for the person to say, well, okay, no, I don't need you at these appointments next week. I've got them. Or actually, a friend was actually going to take me to this doctor's appointment because we were going to get coffee beforehand. So you don't need to worry about that. That can, you don't have to schedule around or anything like that. It can be awkward for both folks, because again, both people are kind of coming at it with some expression of needs. Like, well, I want to be there to support you. I want to make sure I know how I can do that. And that's part of it. Like, using this as just a place where you can understand what, I think that as a caregiver, always, I think sometimes we have to recalibrate ourselves to realize that we are here to support our loved one. And we have to listen to them first and foremost about what it is they need. And if we have questions, we have these times that we can have regular check-ins so that we can ask them. say, hey, I was really concerned when we got these test results back. Is this something that we need to talk about with the doctor? Is it okay if we go if I come with you to that appointment? So just again, it's just that open. It's going to take some time. It's going to be awkward, but start finding ways that you can bring up these questions, concerns, that you can say, okay, I want to be here. Do you need me here? And being comfortable as a care recipient, as the patient, the care recipient, to say in a way that is communicating to your loved one, this is the kind of support that I need. And I appreciate that we have these regular times to talk, because these things will change.
Yeah, you make a good point, Nichole, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, but it does change, right? And that the support needs do change over time. I think in the beginning, when I was initially diagnosed to the time I was re-diagnosed stage 4, I think I've been told, I had cancer maybe 4 or 5 times now, or your cancer is back. So in the beginning, I needed that follow, that support, during my follow-up visits, and hey, we might get some bad news today. And eventually, yeah, that bad news did come. But then over time, as we kind of had a plan and treatment options and so forth, I didn't need her to go every time. Now I'm on scans every 3 months, and we never know what the scans are going to say, and it could change from no evidence of disease one scan to the next scan of hey, you have some new lesions that we're watching. And I'm at the point now where I don't need my caregiver to be there every single appointment. I'm at the point now where I don't even see the doctor the day after the scans. I just have them release the scan report, and I kind of read it myself, and we go over it together, and then we have that plan of, hey, what are my treatment options going forward if something were to come back. So I try to be proactive and saying, hey, if the scan report's bad, this is the course of action, or this is the next step, as opposed to anticipating there not being anything coming up. We kind of anticipate, hey, if these come back as not great scans, this is the next step. So we kind of try to eliminate some of those unknowns ahead of time, and have a plan with the doctor ahead of time.
Now we have a few minutes left, so I wanted to wrap up on a positive-ish note. I wanted, John, you had mentioned earlier in the conversation that you've come out stronger. You and your wife have come out stronger. Wrapping up for our listeners, just share with us some of those ways that your bond has grown closer and deepened.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have been blessed with, great care. We've been blessed with a great support system, family and friends. And one ways that have brought us closer, and how we try to deal with this, is give back. So we created a foundation. We have the Ferrell Foundation, that we've kind of directed all this negative energy into something positive. So we launched our foundation in 2017. We have several fundraisers throughout the year, with our biggest one being a pub crawl. So a lot of fun there. And we've been so far able to donate over $100,000 to cancer research. So that's how we have kind of taken this, negative on both of our, diagnosis, and turn it into a positive. So we've, that has brought us closer, kind of say, hey, what can we do to give back? What can we do to try to change things moving forward? And that has helped us tremendously, kind of working together towards that mission.
Nichole, do you have any final words to add, maybe in terms of how your relationships have deepened, or ways that our listeners can deepen their own?
Yeah, again, I think using this as, always think about how how things that you're putting into place are sustainable. So thinking about, by building into your relationship, having these ongoing conversations and allowing for that flexibility, because things change, and the conversations will vary. It does, I think, build a better comfort and a much deeper, I think, emotional intimacy and more comfort in sharing. It's always important to understand that you're just there to be each other's support, and to listen. And I think I always we're never perfect in these things. I know that I have struggled in, I've talked a lot about open communication and its importance, but there have been times that I have been really kind of caged off and shut down in conversations because it's uncomfortable. And it's when I've been able to step away from that and say, okay, what I need to do is beneficial to me, to my partner, or to whomever, and is going to be helpful for us, then that becomes, I think, a little bit more of that push of, okay, let's really work to make sure that we're communicating effectively and clearly. And sometimes that can mean bringing in some outside help too. If you really find yourself at a struggle point, that's completely fine as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kidney Cancer Unfiltered, brought to you by the Kidney Cancer Association. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to get episodes weekly. And if you like the show, we'd love it if you left a review. It really helps others find us. Thanks again for listening. For more information about kidney cancer, visit the Kidney Cancer Association online at kidneycancer.org.